Welcome to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast, a fascinating and inspiring journey into the world of venture capital and startups. Each episode offers masterclasses and entrepreneurial stories from some of the top minds in the innovation economy. Get ready to unlock new ideas and gain valuable advice for how to thrive as an innovator and an investor. Today on Extraordinary Pursuits, we talk with Greg Reffner, the founder and CEO of Abstrakt, a call center platform that guides agents in real time. Greg has spent years helping to solve a major challenge for call center supervisors. They're often constrained to being reactive when it comes to compliance and QA. Abstrakt is solving that problem. The platform eliminates subjectivity and automates QA on every call to directly improve business outcomes. Abstrakt has been part of the BIP Ventures portfolio since winning the Startup Showdown pitch competition in 2022. And under Greg's leadership, Abstrakt has grown to become a prominent player in the real-time agent assist and QA automation market. In today's episode, he shares what the company has learned along the way. As a highly innovative, sector-disruptive AI platform, finding and keeping product market fit has been key to their ability to gain traction in the market and to scale. This is an episode for every startup working to connect with and to retain their most important audience members by understanding and meeting their most important needs. Greg talks a lot about listening and leadership and being willing to flex where and when necessary to continue to solve the needs of markets as they emerge. So let's get started. Welcome, Greg. Thank you for joining us on Extraordinary Pursuits.
I'm happy to be here, Rochelle. Excited to dive into our journey, what some mistakes that we've made, and hopefully help some other folks not make the same mistakes.
That's always the goal. We love having our founders on the podcast because you have so many specific learnings to share, and folks like you sharing your experience, that is an incredible act of generosity. So really looking forward to this next 30 or so minutes of chatting with you. And as we get started, I would love to have you just take a couple minutes to tell us about yourself. Who are you? Did you always think you'd be an entrepreneur? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I think so the short answer is no. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I got accepted to the Air Force Academy and went through the whole process of getting senator letters, going through all my SATs, all that stuff. Got to my final physical, and they were like, "Hey, you can't be a fighter pilot. Your eyesight's not good enough." And I was like, "Nah, peace out. Not interested in doing that." My dad was extremely disappointed in that decision. And so I thought naturally, if I can't go fly planes, maybe I should build them. And so I went into aeronautical engineering for school. Um, I just also happened to join a fraternity at the time. The major party night of fraternities is Thursday nights. One of my major math classes was Friday mornings. And needless to say, Friday morning math classes didn't happen very often. So I quickly changed majors. I ended up getting kicked out of college for having such a bad GPA. Went to junior college, got into another college. So I spent like 7 years in college. Ended up dropping out of the next college and starting my own exercise equipment company. So 7 years of college, no college degree. My parents were super thrilled with that whole thing. Started an exercise equipment company, invented a piece of exercise equipment, and actually had some pretty good success with that. But I didn't know anything about cash flow management, inventory, cost of goods, nothing. And so ultimately that company kind of got ran into the ground. Um, it was cool. I got, every single NFL team still uses the product that I invented today. So it's cool to kind of look back and see what we accomplished. Um, but I kind of got that itch. I was like, ooh, that was fun, like putting something out there in the world. Spent a couple of years in B2B software sales as an individual contributor and then as a sales leader. And I realized like, okay, I think I could go do this. Um, and so in December of 2019, decided to start my own company and kind of 10, 12 years of hard learnings and what everything that went wrong in the first company I started and try to not make the same mistakes with Abstract.
I think that is such a common storyline for successful entrepreneurs. You tried it, you paid attention to what you loved, what didn't work, what did work, and found a direction to channel all of that. And it's been really fun as I've been preparing for this conversation to sort of learn about the company, to learn about your journey, and to really, learn about the incredibly complex challenge and problem that you are managing to solve. I think that that is something that is going to be really fun for our listeners to hear about. So I think, it would be great for you to just, in simplest terms, because with the mind of an aeronautical engineer and a
Don't
serial
give me credit for
entrepreneur,
that.
let's have you, speak to, to Abstract in its simplest terms. Tell us, exactly what the company is doing. What is the thesis? What problem are you solving?
Yeah, so um, not a lot of people know this, but I'll ask the question like, do you know what an abstract is? And Rochelle, if I were to ask you what is an abstract, what would be your answer to that?
Well, I grew up with an artist as a dad, and I was an English major. So I'm going to say an abstract is some sort of a piece of art.
Yep, perfect. So, being a science major originally, an abstract for me was the summary of a scientific paper. And so what the kind of the genesis of abstract was I wanted in a an abstract of a sales call. And then I realized that sales is part art, part science. There's
Okay.
certain things that you can use science to kind of tell somebody how to sell, but a lot of it's art. So I thought like this name abstract was a perfect way to describe what like the name of the company, but also the outcome of what the product produced, which was an abstract of a sales call. And so that's really how the company started. And then when I was starting Abstract, my wife at the time was like, what sucks most about your job? And I said, listening to my sales reps make the same mistakes over and over again. And so she was like, go solve that problem. And so I knew kind of what the company was going to be named. I knew kind of what I wanted a product to look like or be described as. And then I kind of had this idea that I wanted to solve a real time sales coaching type of problem. And so that was really the genesis of the company was trying to solve fixed sales calls in real time,
Mhm.
but then also have this like clean, concise call scorecard that a sales manager could look at in their abstract without having to listen to the entire call to know kind of what happened on that call. And so that's kind of how things came together, how the name of the company started, all that.
Yeah, that's really tidy. And I love that the idea for the brand of the company and the way it would show up in the marketplace was part and parcel of just the whole idea behind the problem that it was solving. So, how did you know as you were coming up with this thesis, this problem that you could solve, that the problem wasn't limited to your frustration? How did you know that it was a big enough problem that there was a market there for this?
Well, so company most folks are familiar with Gong, Chorus. They have markets valued in the billions of dollars. Their companies are valued at billions of dollars. And so I knew that like the incumbent that we were coming up against already had a company with thousands and thousands of customers that were trying to build repeatability in their sales process. And so I know, kind of kicking this call off, we've talked about call centers and kind of who we serve today. But, we originally thought we were going to go after like Gong and Chorus customers. And that's how I knew that, like, hey, there was enough here because I know there's thousands of companies that are willing to pay 50, 60, 100K to try to solve this for their sales teams.
Hmm. Well, that's really interesting, and I love a good David and Goliath story. I also think you make a really important point, and it's something that Apple tends to do really well. You don't necessarily have to have first mover advantage to succeed in a marketplace. You can actually study what's happening in the market and innovate in ways that make it better. So as you were looking at going to market and you were, the David to the Goliath, what were some of the things that, you were thinking about as you got ready to go to market and try to capture this client base?
Well, honestly, um, I think one of the mistakes a lot of early entrepreneurs make is they overthink things.
Mm,
As I think they try to gather too much data. It's almost like paralysis by analysis. And
hmm
so a lot of our early, I want to say, wins and validation just came from screw it, let's try it.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a lot of thought into putting the product out there. You know, at the end of the day, I was our target buyer. I was a VP of sales. And so I knew what I wanted the product to solve for. And I knew the language, I knew how to describe the pain. So there wasn't a lot of I wasn't asking a lot of questions. I wasn't having to validate a lot of stuff. I was like, hey, let's put this out there in the market and see if the product works as
hmm
opposed to let's validate the idea.
Okay. Okay. No, I think that's really brilliant. And, I think you do hear a lot of founders, I think the more successful ones say, like, let's just try this. Let's just do this. Let's iterate. Let's go. So, you've been in the market for 4 years, give or
4.5
take.
years. Yeah.
Yep. So, what is the biggest way in which the company has evolved since you launched?
Really who our target market is.
Uh-huh.
That was really if you were to look back at like a catalyst for change or a catalyst for growth, it really was the day we decided to go and move into um, supporting businesses that support consumers as opposed to a business that supports other businesses. Um, Late 2022, that was the single biggest change, the biggest catalyst for us is who we decided to start going after and defining as our ideal customer profile.
So, you know, you've mentioned that the biggest evolution that Abstract has undertaken, really since launch, but particularly since 2022, is refining this ideal customer profile. We know that that is absolutely a critical success factor for early stage and scale stage startups. And we also know that it's particularly challenging, especially for disruption companies, like Abstract. I looked at a little bit of research prior to this conversation, and one of the statistics that came up that I thought was really fascinating is that 34% of startups will fail because of a lack of product market fit. So it sounds like you are definitely not in that group of 34%. And I am so glad for
Hopefully
that.
not.
But, but I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking with you about product market fit, and having you share, how Abstract first built its product market fit, but then more importantly, how you have evolved it over the last 4.5 years.
Yeah, so first things first, I can't take credit for the decision to go and kind of change who we wanted to go after, Rochelle. It was a very much a team decision. We all kind of sat around for a couple days and went through a full exercise. But
Mm,
ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, I had this thesis that I wanted to go after a B2B sales team. And so we were winning B2B, SDR, BDR sales teams pretty easily. They would instantly get it, they would see it, then we would get to implementation, it would fall on its face. And I'll explain why here in a second.
mhm,
While we're kind of square peg, round hole, pounding our head against the wall, trying to figure out why we can't get adoption at the end user level, but we can get buy-in at the executive leadership level, we're getting inbound demo requests from insurance companies, from financial services, debt collection companies, from utility companies. And we're literally hitting delete on those notifications. We're deleting them from our HubSpot account, because we don't want to be charged and go up to a paid tier. We want to stay at the free tier. And so one day, Claire, our VP of marketing, is like, we should look at this. Like, why are we ignoring this? And I was like, because that's not our ICP. Like, we don't want to sell those people. And so finally, we sold one company, Johnson and Johnson Insurance, and we were like, let's just try this out. Let's see what happens. Within a month, they were live. Within 6 weeks, they had upsold. Within 2 months, they were a case study. And we're like, okay, there's something here. Like they got live, they are adding users, they're raving fans. 20 other companies over here struggling. Why? What makes these guys so different?
Mhm.
And we went through a full exercise where we went through all the pros and cons and the use cases and the language custom this one customer was using to describe the product versus all these other customers over here. And it really came down to this one customer over here had to say certain things on the phone in a certain way. These 20 customers over here did not have to say things in a certain way. One customer over here, their only form of communication was the phone. This cohort of customers over here wanted nothing to do with the phone. They wanted to be on LinkedIn. They wanted to send emails. And if needed, they wanted to pick up the phone. Um, Third thing, which was the crazy part, Rochelle, PCs were being used at Johnson and Johnson. Macs were being used at all these B2B sales teams.
Huh.
Uh, Due to some hardware limitations on a Mac, there's one extra click a user needs to make in order to use Abstract on a Mac versus a PC. And that one extra click ultimately was the deciding factor between whether the Mac and B2B sales team users were going to use the product versus a PC call center B2C support sales setup. And so there was like 100 different things on this list of kind of comparing and contrasting the two, but
Mhm.
compliance has to be said versus optional. Um, Phone is the only medium of communication. And then three, the hardware being used.
That is absolutely fascinating to me. So there are a couple of things about the story that you just told that I'd love to press on for just a second. And the first is, this idea that the B2B, sales rep was your ICP. Um, what had you done as you were starting the company to develop that ideal client profile, and be so sure that that was who it was going to be? Was it your own personal experience, or was there another exercise that you had done that helped you to sort of identify that profile?
I mean, so a lot of it was personal experience, but I knew a lot of VPs of sales who were
Mhm.
struggling with the same thing.
Okay.
I saw Gong, I saw Outreach, I saw Chorus, I saw them all trying to get into the real-time space and failing. Um, so I there was a kind of a grouping of different things that were happening at the time. But ultimately it really was like I spent so many hours on Saturdays reviewing call recordings myself and listening to my team make the same mistakes over and over again. I knew that there was pain there. Um, and I knew that there were, 75 other thousand sales leaders just like me that if they weren't going through the same pain, then they were really poor sales leaders and they needed to be fired anyways. So.
Hmm. Interesting. So that's really interesting, and I'd love to come back to that later because it sounds like that's still a pervasive challenge for a lot of folks.
Yes.
Um, I think that the next question I have for you is a little bit more personal, and that is,
Yeah.
I would imagine that that process of listening to the market and hearing something that was a bit counterintuitive to what you thought you knew, um, and then deciding, okay, let's give this a shot, let's make a shift. It kind of goes against everything you've been taught about follow your ICP, keep your eye on the ball, and yet that was one of the first things that began a transition for you. So Can you talk a little bit about how you were feeling as a founder and a leader of this organization and saying, okay, you know what, we're going to change our market strategy and go after this other customer type?
So I don't think my dad will ever listen to this podcast. But I would say so much of being successful, I think in anything in life, um, comes down to your ability to have confidence in yourself that if you fail, you'll be able to figure it out and get back on your feet.
Yeah,
And I mean, my dad beat that, didn't literally beat it into my head, but like
right.
that's how I was raised. Like you're gonna get knocked down, you're gonna get back up again. And if you do that enough times, you start to get confidence in yourself that I might make the wrong decision, I might fail, but I'll get back up and I'll try it again. And so just having that mentality, first off, that hey, we're gonna this entire endeavor is a huge risk. This is just a smaller kind of decision within the bigger picture of how risky it is, this thing it is that we're doing. Um, but just having the confidence that, hey, you know what, if this is the wrong decision, like we'll figure it out. Um, Number two is at the time, like we were only three people. And so like we all sat around and we all agreed. Like it wasn't a dictator decision made by me. It was a group decision that we all said, hey, this is the way we're going to go. And when you have your team bought in on it and your team, like Claire and Spencer at the time, kind of were the ones that were pushing it. So Spencer leads our customer success team. And so they were front lines. They were seeing the Google ads, they were seeing the search terms, they were seeing implementation struggles. And so, like, who am I to argue against what's happening on the front lines in the trenches? And they presented the data and made a solid argument. And I knew that if it was the wrong decision, we could figure it out anyways. So, um, yeah, just
Yeah.
rambled on for way too long. Hopefully that answers your question, Rochelle.
That absolutely answers the question, Greg. And for the record, I think your dad would be really proud of you for not only having the confidence to take a risk and, move something forward, but in your ability to listen and your ability to lead and take guidance from your team members. What you just described is a beautiful orchestration of RevOps. You've got your marketing, you've got your sales, and you've got your customer success folks all at the table giving you insight into how that connection is working. And you saw that it was working well for a particular new ICP. I think that's brilliant and something that is really valuable for other founders to, take note of.
Yeah.
Um,
If I
so
can add to that, Rochelle, I would say,
please.
I mean, we made that decision and within 60 days, our entire website had changed. We had rewritten every blog post. We had completely changed our social strategy. We had completely cleaned up our database of contacts. Like when the team gets behind it, like it happened so fast. And it was, I mean, most folks look at it and go like, how the hell did you change all of that so fast? And it was because the team took ownership of it right off the bat.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is a beautiful case study in how a startup should work. So well done. So, the next thing that I would love to spend a little bit of time digging into is the point that you made about the difference between Mac and PC users, and that there was one additional click that made a difference in the adoption rates between the users of those two different platforms. Can you talk a little bit about how the tool itself and the way in which people use the tool has informed your success?
Yeah, absolutely. So on a Mac, it's a closed system. You can't change a sound card. You can't change anything on it. And so when we were building Abstract, we knew like, a B2B sales team was going to probably be on Macs, some type of MacBook Air, MacBook Pro. I am very much a Mac fan. I've never owned a PC. I will never own a PC. And so early development of the product was all geared towards Mac. The problem was we had to create, like when you go into Zoom or anything actually on a Mac and you select your speaker setting, we had to add something called the abstract listening device into that list. And so in order for abstract to work on a Mac with a Zoom call or a GoToMeeting or anything, actually, you had to select the specific speaker setting on a Mac. Um, to me, it was a problem because I'm like, hey, these are sales reps. They're going to do what they're told. Like, just they'll fall in line. I mean, I just thought that was naturally going to happen. And I didn't want to have a PC. So I was like, you're going to build this thing for me anyways. Um, the PC was kind of an afterthought. It was like hey, we'll build this just because we might run into the occasional person who has a PC that might need Abstract to work. Well, that click of that speaker on the Abstract listening device, if a user didn't click it, Abstract wouldn't work on a Mac. And so you have SDRs, BDRs who don't want to be on the phone. Um, I'm gonna generalize here, Rochelle. Out of college, don't necessarily want to be told what to do, have their own way they think is best of doing things. And honestly, like are fighting being presented with here's the right way to handle an objection based upon what we know as the company to be true. And so it was like they would accidentally always forget to click that abstract listening device. And it was just, there was no way around it. Like we had to have it. And if you didn't click it when you started your day, abstract would look like it wasn't working. And so just that combination of the end user being somebody who, like, I'm not even kidding. We were in a room of SDRs at one of our customers at the time, and they're like, does abstract work on TikTok? Like, no, it does not work on TikTok. Like, no, you cannot prospect with abstract on TikTok. So, um, yeah, the friction of who the end user was, the friction of the hardware, the friction of just the fact that they didn't really want to pick up the phone and call people every single day. It was like check, check, check. Just this is not working. And then you get over here, and then somebody, Johnson Insurance comes along. They all have PCs. They don't have to click the abstract listening device. It just automatically defaults to whatever the computer is set up for, and it just worked. And they only can talk on the phone, and they have to be told what to say and do what they're told to say. Like that end user was really like the determining factor.
Yeah. Compliance issues solved. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. So what are some of the metrics that you have tracked since, really discovering this and continuing to move the product and the company forward? How are you making sure that you're meeting the needs and demands of the target market now?
That's been a huge education process for us because when we changed markets, like I didn't know anything about call centers. You know, we I had no clue what to help how to help our customers determine what success looked like. So that was problem one. Problem number two was some of our customers had no idea what metrics they should be tracking with software because they were so used to just picking a couple call recordings a day and listening to them and then writing some results down on a spreadsheet. So we've learned over the past couple of years kind of how abstract helps. One of the big things is just reducing called average handle time. So how fast can you get a customer off the phone? So if I call into a support line or I call somebody to make a sale, how fast can I get that person off the phone? And so we've seen, our customers reduce 30, 40% off that average handle time, which means there's a significant reduction in the number of phone calls or number of agents that need to be had to handle the same volume of phone calls. You can essentially get rid of a third of your call center floor. Um, what's been fascinating for us is the idea of reducing QA time. So kind of similar to what I wanted to do with the product V1 when I first started is I wanted to reduce my time as a sales leader listening to call recordings. Um, we've just taken the same idea and slapped a new name to it. We're now reducing QA time. And so they're able to review calls in mass and at scale, but because problems are being solved on the call, now they don't have to do as much after the call is over. So we're seeing a reduction in QA time. Um, So those are some things that we've learned, kind of been educated on from our customers. And then our customers, we're having to educate them on some things like, hey, how are questions and objections being handled? If
Mhm.
somebody's calling in to cancel, how are you measuring the success rate of that? With Abstract, now it's no longer a question of did you stop them from canceling? It's did the agent actually use what was put in front of them? And did that work? And if not, why?
Mhm.
And so it's allowed them to get a little bit more granular with how they think about scripts and rebuttals and battle cards and objection handling techniques and stuff. So it's been a mixture of us being taught by our customers what works and how to measure success, and us helping coach our customers on that.
That's wonderful. And I think if there's a through line that I've heard in our entire conversation, it has been this willingness and capacity to listen, which makes perfect sense because it goes well with what it is that you have, stood up a company to do. So I think that's very meta and it's very wonderful. You've talked about educating the market and talking to them about the best uses. That I think is something that is oftentimes very difficult for innovation companies to do. As we sort of begin to close down, one of the things that I always really like to do is to give our listeners some actionable ideas. And you've given a ton here, but I'd love to know as we sort of wind down, how are you continuing to educate your market about the uses, the value of what Abstract is providing?
Yeah, something I think it's easy, especially like back when money was being thrown around by VCs and stuff. It's easy to like fall into like hype cycles and try to educate folks around like the hype cycles. So back during COVID, work from home products took off, right? Everybody was convinced that no one was ever going to go back to the office again. And so you saw these companies start educating on the benefits of work from home and collaboration tools, things like that. um, we're seeing the same roller coaster of AI, where everybody's talking about AI replacing all this, replacing all that. We've really kind of stuck to our guns and said, um, yes, there's a place for this, but it's kind of counterintuitive to where a lot of companies out there are saying AI belongs. And so, um, I would say my advice would be don't be afraid to like go against the grain. Um, we've closed some big customers that we have no business closing just as a result of not jumping into the hype cycles of AI this and AI that and where AI is going to be used. Um, because it's natural, right? We see this happen all the time with technologies. Kind of they get super popular, and then humans resort right back to where they were 2 or 3 years ago. And so don't be afraid to kind of stick to your guns, and don't if you're gonna stick to something, you want to educate a market around something, like don't be knocked over by a gentle breeze. Like stick to it, because there are plenty of companies out there that they're slow enough to change where by the time the hype cycle reaches them, it's already gone,
Mhm.
and you're going to be sitting in a good place.
That is a really, really good point on a few different levels. I think that, it's hard to have a conversation with an innovator without talking about AI. AI is obviously pervasive and we see it, disrupting a lot of different industries. And, I think you make a very good point about, standing your ground, knowing what's going on, but standing your ground. Do you have a vision for how AI is changing, contact centers?
Yeah, I mean, one of kind of our big, hairy, audacious goal is to essentially give our customers the option to replace their agents with data that Abstract has collected for them using their own conversations. Um, so many of our competitors in the space don't allow their customers to own their own data. And so we've allowed our customers to own their own data. And so every single one of our customers kind of has a bucket where their conversations live. And our goal is to turn that into an offering that says, hey, Rochelle, you have 2 years of call data here at Abstract. Um, 99% of these calls are the same. We've trained the system on your data. Do you want to replace your 100 folks on the phone with a call simulator agent, whatever you want to call it, built using only your data? And everybody we talk to instantly jumps at that and says, yes, I would love to be a part of that. Because there's so many stories out there and concerns around all these companies just dumping their customers' data into like OpenAI and all these different things. And so, again, we've kind of taken a little bit of a different approach. I think that's something that we'll realize we'll be able to realize here in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think that's very forward thinking and very high integrity as well. I think the last thing that I would observe about what you've said and the things you've talked about is, as a founder, it's really important to know where to plant a flag and where to be flexible. You've kind of articulated that throughout our conversation today, and I think it's a really, really well made point. Just in knowing like where it's okay to flex and where it's not. So as we close, do you have any sort of final parting wisdom that you would share with our listeners, from the perspective of, a founder that has done a really good job of finding product market fit and aligning your revops and really evolving with a fast changing market?
I mean, listen to your team. Like, don't, the moment you have multiple people involved in your company, like it's no longer just about you. And so I know a lot of folks that have like an ego and like, no, I'm going to force a fit here. Like, no, like, did I ever think a contact center was the market I was going to be in? No. But like, it's working, it's fun. And it wouldn't have happened without listening to my team. And so, like, what good's a team if, you're not going to listen to them? So listen to your team. Don't be afraid to ask for hard feedback. Like you may not want to hear what you want it, what you're going to be told, but just listen to the folks around you.
I think that's brilliant. And your team is lucky to have you at the helm. So thank you for your time. Where can our listeners find you online if they want to follow you or get to know you better?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great place. My email is greg@abstrakt.ai. I'm always open to chat, and again, we've made a lot of mistakes. So always happy to share what's worked and what hasn't worked over the past 4.5 years.
Well, you have shared a ton today, and we are grateful for you. And best of luck to you, Greg. We
Thank
will
you.
talk with you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast. Check the show notes on our blog for the resources we discussed. You can find Extraordinary Pursuits on your favorite audio platform. Be sure to subscribe to the BIP Ventures YouTube channel and connect with us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram so you get all the stories, learnings, and ideas for ways to thrive in the innovation economy. And if you liked this episode, be generous. Share it.